Alright, in this video I want to talk about total quality management, and when we are talking about managing quality, the first thing we need to do is just really understand what we mean by quality. Quality does not always mean the best, it does not mean the best product or the best service. Quality is just really the degree to which our product or service does what we intended it to do. It meets our expectations. So that's how we're going to evaluate quality. And to give you guys an example, if you go to a fast food restaurant and they give you plastic silverware, you wouldn't necessarily say that's low quality or for a fast food restaurant. That's what you'd expect at a fast food restaurant. However, if you were to go to a really upscale restaurant and you're sitting down and they bring your food and they give you a plastic fork, um, you're going to say, hey, this is low quality. So quality is not how good the product is. It's just does the product do what it intended to do? That's how we define quality. And we really measure quality by the percent of defects that we have in our product. If we have defective products, we say that they are low quality. Defective meaning they don't do what we intended them to do. And we want to reduce defects as much as possible. And so quality management really deals with how much money we can or we should spend on reducing defects. How much should we spend on ensuring that we don't have any defective products rather? And so if you look down here, you can see I have some data and I have some percent of products without defects. Um, so we want this percent to we want this percentage to be high. We want this percent to be as high as possible. If there was 100%, that'd be perfect. We'd have a super high quality product. And then we have voluntary costs, and voluntary costs are costs that managers can voluntarily choose to incur in order to increase this percentage or reduce the amount of defects. So voluntary costs, for example, would be things like prevention costs or appraisal costs. And so prevention costs would be like controls the manager can put in place in manufacturing process to prevent defective products. And appraisal costs are more of the costs that are in place to identify products before they get out. So in this way, we should be able to identify a defective product before the customer does it. And managers can choose how much they want to spend on prevention costs and appraisal costs. And as you could probably guess, the more you spend on these voluntary costs, the lower your defects. You can see if I spend zero, only 10% of my products will have a defect. However, if I spend $5 per unit on this, 80% of my products will not have a defect. So the more you spend on these voluntary costs, the lower number of defects you will have. So when we are talking about quality management, it's how much should we spend on voluntary costs that's really the question over here. Now, if we don't spend money on voluntary costs, we're going to have defects, and if we have defects, we're going to have failure costs. And failure cost can be internal or external. So internal failure cost would be we create some defective products, but we found out that they were defective before we actually sold them to the customer. But there's still a cost to that because we've got to create new products. External failure cost would be when we sold defective products to our customers. So our customers now have the defective products and they are bringing them back to us and saying, hey, this is a defective product. Obviously, external failure costs are going to be higher than the internal failure costs because your customers aren't happy with the products, or there's going to be reputational effects to that as well. So as you could probably guess, the more defective products I have, the higher my failure costs are going to be. So let's say only 10% of my products are free from defects. My failure costs going to be really high. It's going to be 12. And as my defect rate decreases or my number of products without defects increases, my failure costs will decrease. So managers want to spend money on voluntary costs like prevention costs and appraisal costs in order to reduce failure costs. And what quality management is trying to do is decide how much should you spend on voluntary costs. So to assess that, we are going to look at our total quality cost. And our total quality cost is going to be our voluntary cost plus our failure cost. So this is what managers they really want to look at. They want to minimize the total quality cost. So if only 10% of my products are without defects, my voluntary cost would be 0, which means that I'm not spending anything. And my failure cost is 12, and so my total quality cost is 12. Now, as I spend more on voluntary costs, my total quality cost drops to a certain point. You can see it decreases until we get to spending $3 on voluntary cost right here. At this point, my total quality cost is 9, and after this point, my total quality cost starts to go back up. And that's because after a certain point, spending more on voluntary costs, you're really not reducing your failure cost that much. I mean, you can only spend so much on prevention and appraisal costs and get something out of that. At some point, you're just going to spend money, but you're not really reducing your defect rate that much. You're really not decreasing your failure cost that much as well. So a manager's real goal is to minimize the quality costs, and they're going to spend money on voluntary costs like appraisal costs and prevention costs up to the point that minimizes total quality costs. So that would be $3 right here, is what we would want to spend on voluntary costs. Oh, all right, you can see that graphically right here. Down here I have percent of products without defects, and this is my cost per unit. So you can see I have three things graph. I have my total quality cost, which is a green line right here. I have my voluntary cost, which is a blue line, and I have my failure cost, which is the red line. All we want to do is we're trying to identify the lowest point on the total quality cost line, which is right here. And at this point, that's how much the manager should spend on voluntary cost. This is the same thing as you saw on the table. So right here, which is $3 of voluntary cost, that's what the manager should spend on voluntary costs at that point. They reduce internal quality cost. After that, total quality cost starts to increase again. So it's not really a good deal to spend any more on voluntary costs.